Welcome, everybody. All right, today we're talking about conspiracy theories and fake news. Conspiracy theories from a psychological perspective are often linked to distrust in authority, political cynicism, psychological traits like paranoia, narcissism, insecure attachment, and the belief in these theories, conspiracy theories, can be reinforced by what's called circular reasoning, where evidence against or a lack of evidence for a conspiracy is interpreted as further proof of its existence. And so there's some thought process, cognitive factors that contribute to why people migrate to these conspiracy theories. One of them is hallucinatory pattern perception, where people may perceive patterns or connections where none actually exists, but it leads them to believe in hidden plots. There's also confirmation bias, where they think in their mind, even though it may be a 1% chance, that they are looking for information to reinforce what their belief is. And so they tend to seek out and interpret information. And once again, the real term is seek out information that confirms their existing belief, even though those beliefs are based on a conspiracy theory, a biased idea of what the end result is. Now, where do we do conspiracy theories the most? Usually with your spouse. That's where you do it. And then you live in your theory and you buy your theory about your spouse until they become what you believe they are. And then you lose touch with the idea of who they really are, and then you end up miserable or divorced. Very expensive conspiracy theories. They are very expensive. They create a lot of chaos and they create a lot of people doing a lot of stupid things. There's a thing called Trump derangement syndrome. And what's really interesting is the degree that people will go in their belief of a conspiracy and to the degree of their behavior that they will go in their belief of a conspiracy rather than taking things on the surface as what they are. They've got to read into everything and turn it into a Broadway performance, if not an aria in an opera. And then they start singing the aria before the world. It's pretty amazing watching it. There's also what's called causal attribution errors, where people may attribute events to intentional, malevolent causes, even when a simpler, more mundane explanation is available. And what are the psychological traits? Well, we talked about before, but the tendency to be suspicious or distrustful of others can make people more susceptible to conspiracy theories. That's called paranoia. Narcissism, which you believe you are right about everything. Your own special knowledge and your hyper intelligence and your understanding that you have grasp of information that other people don't have can lead to a sense of superiority, making it easier to believe in conspiracy theories. That's why in communities like New York City and Seattle and Boston, these places are in very, very much about psychology because the people believe in their own theories so much, in their own hypothesis so much that they project them on other people and they create enormous amounts of chaos in their communities, in their what they do to their children and what they do to their schools and how they deal with their police, how they deal with their homeless, how they deal with all their psychotic beliefs. Their hypotheses are so much more important than the reality of living because they're so intelligent, but they lack common sense. And so in big cities, you're going to find a lot of super intelligent people with no common sense, and they're running the cities. And it's really sad watching how detached and stupid they all are when they get together and try to bias with each other their hypothesis on what should happen. It's very sick. Also an insecure attachment that's involved in people that believe in conspiracy theories and in fake news. People with insecure attachment styles are prone to distrusting others and seek out explanations for everything that reinforce their sense of unease. There's this analytical thing about hyper smart people because they try to analyze emotions rather than understand emotions. It's very sad because they don't want to factor in the emotional part of human beings because they don't understand it because everything has to be 1 plus 1 equals 2 in their mind. They have to have a reason for everything. And it's really sad because here's the deal about emotions, which take up a large part of our brain. Our emotions can only last 3 minutes, but if you have to add a reason to your emotion, you're going to exacerbate that emotion. That's why people who love anarchy, people who love to be advocates like we have in Congress, in the Democratic Party, is filled with advocates because these people have to reinforce their emotions. Well, I feel this way because this person did this, and I feel this way because this happened, and I feel this way because that happened. And what happens is they keep adding 3 more minutes and more intensity, like a wave that keeps coming in stronger and stronger and stronger until it's finally a tidal wave and takes over their brain. They turn themselves into psychosis because they overthink their emotion to the point, and they justify their emotion to the point that it becomes something that they live in. And then they go crazy. And then they project it on everything that they believe is responsible for the way they feel. And then they all get together and do it together. And it's crazy. And it's crazy to watch it, but that's what it is to be a human being. There's also social and political factors that contribute to the idea of what are conspiracy theories and fake news. Now, fake news is basically there's misinformation and there's disinformation. Now, misinformation is you just don't have all the facts. So it's okay. We get it. You're just not fully informed. But then there's disinformation, and that's what fake news is. And that's what these psychotic people we have standing in front of us in television and in ABC, NBC, and all the CNN and the MSNBC and all these crazies that are out there because they love to dispose. They're evil. I mean, they love to dispense disinformation, so they leave out details, they leave out information, they leave out all kinds of things to reinforce their biased points of view. And so they will represent something in a very biased way to communicate a perception that they want to communicate. So if they want to think that we are now going to be an aristocracy, a government that is run by one person, well, yes, they're going to reinforce that perspective and shove it down our throats all day long, every day, and all the news will come through that funnel rather than, that we're all going to be run by Hitler and we're all going to end up doing terrible things. They're gonna take that conspiracy all the way down the line and make that bias what they believe, and they're going to reinforce it and collect evidence every day of their life to reinforce that perspective. And that goes across the board, Republican, Democrat, human being. It just happens. It happens. But here's the social and political part of what creates conspiracy theories: distrust of authority. Well, that starts in the home when you're young. And that then begins with other people who have traumatized you with their authority. So, distrust of authority is a big factor in conspiracy theories and often thrives in environments where trust in an institution is low. So, if you've had a teacher who happened to be an ogre, or a principal that was an ogre when you were younger, or a sibling that had authority over you when you were younger, if you had alcoholic parents or people that were supposed to be adults and had authority and they abused it and it affected your life, you're probably going to offer conspiracy theories throughout the rest of your life with people with authority. Then there's political cynicism. People who are cynical about politics may be more likely to believe in conspiracy theories that portray politicians as corrupt and manipulative. Well, the fact is, They are corrupt and manipulative because most of them have now been paid off and influenced because of the way our government's designed and the way Congress allowed itself to be constructed. They get paid off by all kinds of things, including creating departments in the government that fund their own personal needs. And so they collect huge paychecks beyond what they make being in Congress. They get to make tons and tons of money in the stock market by how they influence businesses. They get to make tons and tons of money with lobbyists by the way they vote. And so we do not have the same representation politically that we used to have because they're all bought off. And so what we are going to have to do is be able to vote for ourselves instead of have depend on these idiots in Congress to do it for us because they're all a bunch of lobbyists. They're all a bunch of anarchists and they're all a bunch of advocates for themselves. They're not advocates for the people, they're advocates for themselves. And so our political system is very messed up. It is not what the original doctrine of the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution laid out. It has been changed over the years into something that people make money on and use as their own bias and get their own way and support their own family and their own selfish needs. And so now we're funding all these idiots in the world who go off and spend thousands of dollars on their cruises and millions of dollars on their homes, all off the tax dollar of the human being that lives in our country. And it's sad. And this is goes across the board in every country across the world. And then there's this thing called groupthink, belonging to a group that believes in a particular conspiracy theory, reinforces those beliefs, and makes it more difficult to challenge them. So if you're going to believe in what a group believes, like the Democratic Party, they all vote together. No matter what the individual is, they all vote together on anything and everything that supports their group think. So when you're supporting the Democratic Party or a Democratic candidate, you're basically contributing to groupthink. And so they're gonna vote on whatever they want. They're gonna vote on whatever the advocates are advocating and whatever the lobbyists are lobbying. That's what they're gonna vote on. And it has to do with anything that's gonna benefit them financially or benefit their sense of needing power because they want to run everything. Then there's consequences of group identity. Belief in conspiracy theories leads to a distorted view of reality. It makes it difficult to engage in constructive dialogue. It also can contribute to social division and conflict. It also, in some cases, leads to harmful actions like violence or acts of terrorism. People that believe in conspiracy theories, once they work up their emotions and once they justify why they're emotional, they will go psychotic, especially if they reinforce each other in a group. It's sad. This is how, like, the Ku Klux Klan happened, where they just go crazy and they reinforce each other's perspective about the black person, and then they go kill the black person and hang them and do terrible things to their families and their homes and their lives. This is how it works. And then they will make out the black person to be the prejudiced person instead of themselves. So people that believe in conspiracy theories are highly discriminating, and yet they will not hold themselves accountable for being discriminating because they, in their group think, have to form their little gang and do their little advocacy thing, and they lose their objectivity. They lose their common sense and they lose their ability to function independently as human beings. And quite frankly, there is so much need for that in the Communist Democratic Party that they basically have come down to the idea that if you don't believe in what our anarchists believe in, you're going to get punished. And that's what the whole woke strategy was about. Conspiracy theories have occurred in society for centuries, but they've gained increased prominence in our contemporary culture, fueled by the unease of an anxious world. So in high-speed information exchange and in social media, it's almost too fast. It's so fast that there's no way to counter conspiracy theories immediately. It's very hard to correct these psychotic people. These theories find themselves fertile ground, they root and they spread. And there are people who are called producers of the news who are the most evil humans on the planet Earth who love to spread their bias theories as fast as they possibly can. And it's not the people necessarily that's on the TV that are doing it, it's the people that are constructing the information that they share that are doing it. And those people are not getting weeded out whatsoever. They often play into the fears and the uncertainties of people, and they stir a lot of chaos in our society, which creates a lot of mental health issues for people. It is really hard to live in an unsafe world. It's really hard to live in a world where they feel that anybody that's in authority is out to kill the rest of the world, out to destroy, out to do. I don't even know what they think they're doing. They think that we're trying to destroy the world or something. I don't know what they're thinking. They're crazy. The appeal of theories can be multifaceted. They often have simple explanations for complex problems. They love to simplify everything. Oh, yeah, we're going to make the government run the grocery stores to level out the prices. No, what you're going to do is you're going to end up increasing the prices and making things very hard to get a hold to buy, especially things that people want, because now you're going to have to buy only the things that the government decides is worthy of you buying. They often use very simple explanations. They validate pre existing beliefs or biases, and they provide a sense of control in times of chaos and confusion. If you look at the immigration, we've got millions and millions of people that are here illegally. They weren't vetted, and they're out there in schools with their kid, their kids are with their kids, and they're out there robbing and doing stupid things, and they're working for cash because they can't get a paycheck. So what they end up doing, and they're driving cars without a driver's license, and they're killing people, and they're wetting down our society because the Democrats want to get elected, and they want them to be citizens, and they want to be able to have them vote so they can get their ugly ass in office. And so here we are trying to vet these people out, and they don't say illegal immigrants. What they say is immigrants. Well, that's a huge difference between an illegal immigrant and an immigrant. But the Democrats don't care about that because they want those votes because they need that power because they got to pay for their multi-million-dollar home and their ugly podcasts and their stupid opinions and how they can stand up before people that are just like them and reinforce their perspectives. These are some of the ugliest, most evil humans on the planet. We sit there and watch them all day long, every day. It's very sad. And if you say anything about it, you're the bad guy. It's crucial to explore the psychological mechanisms that make these theories so enticing and how they gain traction in our society. I got to tell you, I live in Seattle. Seattle is one of the most corrupt places on the planet. We have all these psychotic people with high intelligence and no common sense trying to make up hypothetical rules about how the world should be, and they believe their own bullshit so bad that they will enforce it and throw it on every human being they can get and try to gain power to prove their hypothesis over and over and over again. It's sad. It's sad, and we watch it, and guess what? We have mail-in ballots, so we have no way to have an opinion because if you contradict their opinion, they will destroy your vote. It's very sad. And this is not the only city like that, but we're seeing it across this country and across the world. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk more about fake news and conspiracy theories. Come back. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about conspiracy theories and fake news. You know, in social psychology, the fascination with conspiracy theories and why people believe them has increased interest. And it's often associated with secret plots and hidden agendas. And these theories can have significant societal impacts. One of the primary ingredients of why conspiracy theories happen is because just like during COVID, people start living in their head. They have too much time on their hands. They sit inside their own little chamber in their own little brain and they form their own little thoughts and theories. And then they buy their own thoughts and theories. And they believe they're right about everything. And then they project it on the rest of the world. If we lived in a third world country, we would not have the time or the ability to be depressed or anxious or have conspiracy theories because every one of us would have to figure out how to survive either independently or together. We don't have time for it. But since everybody's nice and safe and living in their own little bubble, living off their mommy and daddy, sitting in their basement, playing their video games, having a good old time, living off mom and dad's retirement, not having any goals, working at Starbucks or whatever stupid thing they have to do to buy their little, meals from, delivery people or whatever they have to do to get by. That's what people are doing these days. They're not taking accountability for their life. And so what do? They live in their heads and they find every possible way they can live in their head. They don't even like to socialize. They don't even want to get married. They don't want to breed. They don't want to create responsibilities in this life. God forbid. There's a whole generation of these crazies. People are not getting married until they're 30, 32 years old. They're almost beyond the ability to have kids. Now they got to store them and store their eggs and their sperm so that eventually, when they're 500 years old, they can have a kid by somebody else, by the way. They got to put it in somebody else because they're too old to do it. Societal impacts, shaping political views, influence public behavior. A lot of that comes out of conspiracy theories and battling those crazy conspiracy theories. But when psychological factors lead people to subscribe to these unfounded beliefs, things happen. Conspiracy theories thrive on cognitive biases, mental shortcuts that allow us to make sense of the world around us. One such bias is called proportionality bias, which leads people to believe that significant events must have substantial causes. So sometimes individuals find it hard to accept that monumental occurrences could result in simple, mundane things. Here's the deal. Russia, Ukraine. Why is that there? Because Putin wants more land. He wants to be able to invade Europe. He wants to be able to get more land for Russia because he remembers the USSR and all the countries that used to be controlled by the USSR. He wants to get back to that. So why are they at war? They're at war because they want more land. It's that simple. We will sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people so that we can get more land for our country. I want more power, I want more authority, and I want more land, and I want to control Europe because I want to control more of the economy of the world so I can make more money, and maybe everybody will thrive from that. It's also, you know, some people find it hard to accept that these mundane causes cause enormous problems. There's a bias that can be fueled of belief in conspiracy theories that proposes grand, elaborate explanations for significant events. That's why Trump derangement syndrome is so important to understand because they have all kinds of elaborate things they've added on to very simple common sense solutions. A classic example of the proportionality bias in action is the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963, 1 week before I was born. Many find it difficult to accept that a significant event could be the work of a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald. Instead, they seek more substantial explanations, leading to numerous conspiracy theories, including the involvement of the CIA, the mafia, even the Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. These theories provide grand, intricate plots that fit the event's magnitude, satisfying the proportionality bias. Another cognitive bias at play is a confirmation bias. People tend to seek out and focus on information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs while ignoring or dismissing any other evidence. Hence, a person starts believing in conspiracy theories. They're likely to interpret new information in a way that reinforces their belief. And so now they have a funnel that they take all information through, and it has been reinforced. It all has to come down to reinforcing my conspiracy theory beliefs. Then there's the moon landing hoax, and exemplifies confirmation bias as well. So in 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, many believed it to be a staged act by the US government to assert dominance in the space race against the Soviet Union. So supporters of the theory often ignore the overwhelming evidence, like moon rocks actually being brought back to the Earth, that, thousands of independent validations of lunar landings and testimonies from astronauts are all wrong. Instead, they focus on anomalies they believe to see in the lunar footage, like fluttering flags suggesting the presence of wind, which is impossible in the vacuum of space, or discrepancies in the light and the shadow angles in the photographs, interpreting these as proof that the moon landing was staged. This is a classic case of confirmation bias, looking for evidence to confirm pre-existing beliefs while dismissing the overwhelming evidence that contradicts the conspiracy. Social influences also play a critical role. In an environment with high mistrust in authorities, conspiracy theories flourish. They often provide alternative explanations that they can basically align more with a person's worldview, especially if they already feel marginalized and suspicious of the mainstream narratives. So then there's the emotional maturity and conspiracy theories. Research suggests also that emotional maturity is a big factor and the lack thereof, and it influences your susceptibility to conspiracy theories because you've got to logically deduce everything. You can't be that somebody got mad and did something stupid. It has to be there was a huge reason why they did all that. It had nothing to do with them being angry and stupid and impulsive. It had everything to do that they wanted to destroy the world. A study published in the European Journal of Social Psychology found a negative correlation between emotional intelligence and the belief in conspiracy theories. Essentially, people with higher emotional intelligence, a key component of emotional maturity, are less likely to believe in those theories. And that's because emotional maturity is better than handling ambiguity and uncertainty. People that are highly analytical need black and white. They want the world to be black and white, but they know the world's not black and white. They know that we're emotional creatures. They know that we can be influenced by all kinds of different things. That's why we have sensory perceptions. But God forbid there is that. They have to black and white everything. Well, you did this. You're one of those. You're one of these. You're this. You're that. We're not. We are gray, gray, gray. We're as gray as can be. Even the psychotic Democrats are gray to some degree, even though they're afraid to say it. If you love or find yourself drawn to conspiracy theories, there's a lot of steps you can take. First, you want to develop critical thinking skills, and you want to strive to differentiate between reliable and unreliable sources of information. On the second hand, you need to engage in open and empathetic dialogue about the specific theory, which often reveals why it seems appealing. With the psychotic Democrats, you can't even have a dialogue with them. With Trump derangement syndrome, you can't even talk to these people. They're just psychotic. At times, professional help may be necessary. Psychological consultation can provide a safe space to explore beliefs and their roots, possibly uncovering underlying concerns of fears driving interest in conspiracy theories. If you're an analytical person, you know there's an emotional side of all human beings. You're missing out on one of the big puzzle pieces of mankind. Therefore, all your transactions are going to feel vulnerable. You might think you're not a believer, but a 2019 poll found that nearly 80% of the people in the United States follow at least one unproven theory, conspiracy or not. You might enjoy the thrill that the conspiracy theories offer. Many people do, but there's more of it. Conspiracy theory, once again, is an idea that a group of people is working together in secret to accomplish evil goals. Now, sometimes in the real world, people indeed do wicked things. Groups can do horrible things. Look at Hitler. Very easy. Look at the Democrats. It's very easy. They can do some really evil stuff as a group. Groupthink is really easy to hide behind. You know, but the deal is that we have to look at criminal networks like the mafia, terrorist groups, sex trafficking rings, illegal immigrants, even high-level political figures, celebrities that get involved from time to time. In other words, real conspiracies often exist. But how do you tell the difference between real plots and conspiracy theories? Well, you have to be able to differentiate. Criminal cases are built on solid, provable evidence, not hunches, not coincidences, not fabricated information like social media posts. On the other hand, when you closely examine the facts, conspiracy theories don't hold up. What makes conspiracy theories more deceptive is that they are woven into real life events. They're strung together in a fictional way, and in some instances, they might make sense. But when you dig deeper, you start noticing the lack of conspiracy consistency and fact-based proof. And no, lack of proof shouldn't be taken as evidence of a conspiracy, but that's the whole point. Conspiracy theories take flight during unsettling times, and we are in one right now. For example, in a pandemic, which we've been in unsettling times for years, ever since Reagan, during a close election in a divided country after a terrorist attack, 9/11, holy crap. This country's been in chaos. The world has been chaos. Painful, uncertain times lead many people to find alternative ways to make sense of shocking and painful situations. Following a conspiracy theory might help you feel like you understand the events. And in turn, this could lead to alleviate some uncertainty and anxiety. But there's more conspiracy theories than the need to make sense of shocking events. So there's some traits that are involved in personalities of conspiracy theories. And one of them is, once again, paranoia and suspicious thinking. That means they don't trust anybody. There's very few people that they trust. Then there is eccentricity. There's low trust in others. There's a strong need to feel special. There's a belief in the world as a dangerous place, seeing meaningful patterns where none exist. And the strongest predictor of belief in conspiracy theories is having a personality that falls into the spectrum of schizotypal. Schizotypal is a set of personality traits that ranges from magical thinking to dissociative states to disorganized thinking patterns and to psychosis. Some of these people in this political environment we're in have even moved to other countries because of their schizotypal beliefs. Not all schizotypal personality traits translate into personality or psychiatric disorders, but many people have one or two of the symptoms of a schizotypal person, but they don't qualify for the full diagnosis. But a lot of this stuff comes out of their childhood. Preliminary research also has suggested that belief in conspiracy theories is linked to people's need for uniqueness. The higher the need to feel special and unique, the more likely a person is to believe in a conspiracy theory. So they become what's called histrionic, a derivative of hysterical, where they have to be the center of attention and they load up their conspiracy theories as a way to seek attention. Narcissism, which is low agreeableness, they have to be right about everything. Openness to experience is also a Machiavellian trait of people that believe in conspiracy theories. And so we have to understand that suspicion in many paranoid people's beliefs and many narcissistic people's beliefs and any Machiavellian people's beliefs is an evolutionary advantage. I should be suspective of everything. Humans seem to be prone to suspicious thoughts and paranoia. In fact, some expert sources have studied paranoia and suspicious thoughts as an important evolutionary advantage. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And that's a lot of time in your head. And you must feel really safe and really well provided for to have the ability to have time to pull that crap off. Having the capacity to imagine and anticipate that other people might form coalitions and conspire to harm a person's clan, you know, is a very, it can make you feel safe because I already know that they're going to do this, 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 and this. Okay, when you have those thoughts, it makes you feel safer because you have believed and you've come to believe the worst possible outcomes and you prepare for that. And you think since you're prepared for it, evolutionary, you're on the right place. No, you're in a warped little world because you do not believe there is goodness at all and not everything is complex as you want to believe. All right, we're going to take another break. We're going to come right back and talk more about fake news and conspiracy theories. Come back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're talking about conspiracy theories and fake news. You know, there's other contributing factors to what makes up a person who loves to believe in conspiracy theories and fake news. Believing in conspiracy theories can also be linked to distortions in cognitive process. So, in other words, a distortion in how you think makes you prone to seeing patterns between events where there are none. Now, old people, who especially the ones that used to protest during the 60s, have a lot of spare time and they talk to each other quite a bit, and they have a lot of time to sit around and reinforce their craziness and then go project it on mankind. You know, apophilia, and that is the tendency to connect the dots. The human tendency to seek and find patterns is a part of many human beings. Everywhere is indeed something that has often been linked to believing in conspiracy theories. The human brain has evolved into seeing patterns in just about everything. And it's an evolutionary advantage, but it's also a natural tendency because we want to protect ourselves. So we recognize animal figures in the clouds or uncover creepy faces in the bathroom wallpaper. We might find three friends all named the same name that we tend to notice. It doesn't mean that every time we connect the dots we're right though, you know, but as humans we dissect patterns and randomness in an effort to make sense of the world very quickly. And this process makes us prone to cognitive errors, like seeing connections between events that none exist. And for a species so intent on connecting the dots to make sense of the world, this information, this rich environment, is fertile ground for confusion and conspiracy theories. And so there's actually a name for the phenomenon, apophanelia. And this is the tendency to perceive meaningful connection in random situations. Experienced, people take their games and they find a goal to a clue to move to the phase of the game. So when you're going through games like kids are addicted to now, video games, things like that, people are always looking for patterns because if you look for patterns, that is your way through a game. Patterns are a big part of all games. And therefore, the more you like games, the more you like conspiracy theories because you're looking for patterns and you're learning to look for patterns. Once again, some people consider that to be a survival mechanism. There's also a connection between different visual elements and stimuli to form non existent patterns. For example, seeing a face in the bark of a tree or a specific sign that a light projected on a certain place in the water where the fish were. There's also this thing called clustering, tendency to find a pattern in random sequences, finding a topic in a randomly generated sequence like X VV X VV XXXVX, or seeing a trend in stock market fluctuations, finding patterns in how letters are laid out, all that kind of stuff. Our brain is trained to do that. Then there's this thing called a gambler's fallacy. That's also another ingredient of conspiracy theory people. Inaccurate belief that an event repeatedly happens during a certain period of time. Everything has to happen threes, you know? It occurs left off less often, but often if you toss a coin and get heads four times in a row, you'll likely bet it's going to be tails the next time. There's also mathematical explanations. There's called a thing called Ramsey's theory. This theory states that any large structure will implicitly contain patterns if you really pay attention. That way, even in mathematics and geometry, patterns can be found wherever there are enough elements to connect. So, according to the Ramsey theory, if you were to line up the text or just about any book, you'd find hidden words, sometimes several meaningful ones, in a row. In other words, if you're looking for clues somewhere, you're bound to find them. And then there's this other one that's a more modern part of conspiracy theory makeup is QAnon, which is excitement living in fiction. And that is an internet conspiracy theory, and it's recently captured a huge segment of the public's attention. And it might be a strong indicator of whether possible reasoning underneath, but the people that are delusional with QAnon has become mainstream because they believe that an anonymous government insider known as Q often drops mysterious clues and riddles to expose the deep state apparatus. And according to these believers, They range from the colors of light. They range from coded messages posted on the internet. They have all kinds of weird things that they've come up with, secret agents and reasoning why certain things are happening. But there's this idea with that theory that the internet is bred with people that connect with each other socially through all kinds of different forums, TikTok, Facebook, whatever. Um, and basically, what they're doing is they're reinforcing each other's ideas and they're collecting evidence to prove themselves correct. And so they think they're living in a mystery. They're living in a fictional story and they have to reinforce it over and over. And it's very exciting for them to develop this story through the internet together as people. And people use social media to do that. And unfortunately, it reinforces them all the way to the point where they start acting on their beliefs. Now, if you want to challenge conspiracy theories and fake news, which is conspiracy theories, you want to foster critical thinking and empathy rather than directly confronting beliefs with facts. So, what do you do? Well, how do you battle this thing? Number one, you got to keep calm and you got to show respect. There is good in everybody, even the psychotic people that believe in conspiracy theories. There's good in these people. You have to look for the good. You also have to decipher what the bad is. Not all of us are both good and evil. We are all both good and evil. If you want to have a good life, if you want to live a calm life, you have to look for the good in people. Dismissing someone will cause them to shut down. Remember that beliefs in conspiracy theories are often tied to people's worldviews and their fears. So you can either live in faith or you can live in fear. People that live in fear reinforce their fear with conspiracy theories. You also have to move to a private conversation. Publicly challenging someone causes them to feel shame and become defensive in front of an audience. Having a private one-on-one talk removes social pressure and is more likely to be productive. The other thing is you want to find common ground. You want to establish shared values, acknowledge any legitimate concerns that might underlie their conspiracy beliefs, like distrust of powerful institutions. Starting from a place of agreement can build rapport. You also want to be patient. You want to be realistic. Changing a person's entrenched beliefs can be a very slow process. It's not a single conversation. You set small, realistic goals, you know, plant a seed of doubt rather than expecting an immediate change of heart. You also want to encourage critical thinking. Ask open-ended questions. Instead of making assertions, ask curious questions about the sources and the logic. For example, where did you first hear that? Have you considered any alternative explanations? This encourages the person to reflect on their own reasoning. You also want to co-investigate the evidence. Frame the discussion as a collaborative effort to seek the truth, not a debate. Offer a look at their sources together. Follow their claims back to the original content. This helps identify misinterpretation and cherry pick data. You also want to focus on the source's credibility. Our current news, our current media has zero credibility. They actually threw themselves behind Kamala Harris. How could that happen? Yuck. How stupid can you be? They must be making a fortune. Somebody's paying them a lot of money to be that stupid. So you focus on credibility, evaluating the source itself rather than the claims. You discuss the source's potential biases, their motives, like financial or reputational gain, and you examine the messenger, which can be more effective than attacking the message. You also want to highlight logical inconsistencies. You want to help them spot contradictions within the conspiracy theory. Encourage them to ask questions. Do the details of the theory make sense? You also want to point out internet inconsistencies that can help erode the certainty. You also want to be able to explain the role of algorithms. Many people are unaware how social media works. Algorithms mean I see what you're looking for. I'm going to give you more of what you're looking for. Why do they do that? Because they want you to buy what they're selling. So, of course, they're going to lead, the internet is going to follow what you look for and they're going to give you more of what you like. You also have to provide a fact-based narrative. When you challenge a conspiratorial person, you have to offer fact-based, reliable, alternative information. You present a clear, straightforward account of what's true and that can fill the void and debunk. It's really simple. If you look at people with common sense is never complicated. Common sense is stuff that most all people understand. When you communicate with common sense, you're going to have a consensus because the vast majority of people, except for the psychotics, are going to understand that common sense is common sense. But some people have to oppose that, and they make a life opposing it because there are people out there that will pay for their advocate perspective, their cognitive bias perspective. They will actually pay for it. They will find a way to program a different way of thinking that reinforces what they want you to believe. You also have to have alternative explanations. You provide a fact-based narrative. When you challenge a conspiracy claim, offer fact-based, reliable alternative explanation. There's also Occam's razor is the simple concepts to challenge complex theories. Explain that the simplest explanation is often the most likely, and elaborate conspiracy theories typically feature more moving parts than reality. Things are not nearly as complex as you make them out to be, but we as human beings have to control everything, so we make everything as complex as we can. You also want to share information proactively. You can help by regularly sharing factual information from credible resources on your own feeds, on your own information that you share. Misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is the most dangerous because it is biased to affect you. It is meant to trigger your emotions and it's meant to get you worked up so that you will either be credible or non-credible in how you deliver information to other people. It's really important to understand that conspiracy theories can get us all off base. They can make life very, very, very complicated. It's also very important for us to understand that we as people, we really need to help each other out. And we need to, you know, we need to help each other factualize. We need to help each other ground each other. All right, that's our show. I want to thank you for listening. I love hearing from you. You could do that at drgbmft at sbcglobal.net or our webpage at libsyn.com, Dr. Gary Bell's Absurd Psychology. Now, if you want to make crime pay, become a lawyer. Also, true criminals become deaf and don't speak English when caught. Also, one crime has to be covered by another. Democratic politicians love to make laws to make crime easier and turn all of us into the need to survive. Thanks for listening, everybody.